is yours.
Thank you so very much. I did say keep that bio brief, which would have just been to say, hi, Fiona. But I thank you. I thank you so very much for that very warm welcome. I think the initial Toastmaster said we need to smile. So let me recognize, Madam President, in the first instance, all of the executive members of the team, the Toastmasters and the guests. Thank you again for the invitation to be here. It is obviously my pleasure to speak education. What we will do this evening is to try and keep it brief, because I'm really hoping that we can have some engagement. As for me, throughout the Caribbean, we're speaking the same language. In as much as we may feel that we come from various Caribbean islands, I have seen throughout everything that I've done is basically the same thing over and over. So it speaks to not only looking at the issues, but also thinking of what are the solutions moving forward. And for me, it's not only about talk. We can do a lot of that, but is there anything practical that we can implement in our little neck of the woods to make things better? There is a short PowerPoint presentation, and I will follow the red, green, and yellow, lest I be charged with something. So could we just share the PowerPoint presentation, please, and let's get started. Try to keep it tight so that we can have a bit of a discussion thereafter. Okay. So these are my quick thoughts. We can already go to the first slide. I would have told you, or you would have known, that I'm the former Chief Education Officer in St. Lucia. And that is not a role I took very lightly. It was a role that I was able to do during the COVID period, very difficult time for us as small nation people. And it really spoke to some of the big issues that we have. It uncovered major issues. And even at this point, I think of St. Lucia all the time. I think of, what the next steps are for our children, what they've lost, what we could have regained, and looking forward. So I did leave, and some of you may know that I had resigned from that post. Very briefly, in the St. Lucian system, you must work 27 continuous years to qualify for a pension or gratuity. And for me, that would not have been possible because the international experience that I speak of, which should hopefully be an advantage, proved to be a big difficulty, as I would have continued very much along the way and not qualify for anything in my latter days to support my children, my two daughters, 26 and 24, Alexi and Shari, and now my grandson. So this was the basis. Nevertheless, let's talk about education now. But it doesn't take away from the fact that our hearts are on the right place, and that's why maybe Toastmasters is doing what it's doing. So what is our current situation? And I dare say, in as much as I will reference St. Lucia, I have sat at meetings, at OECS meetings, even now in the BVI, in other parts of the Caribbean, and some of the same things are coming up. And I say, what do we do differently? So for us, the current situation surrounds itself with early childhood competencies. As far as I'm concerned, we give our least qualified people to our early childhood. We pay them the smallest amount because we believe in some way that, they're just dealing with little children. But what we fail to recognize is that if the foundation is weak, as we have seen time and time again, we will continue to suffer. And all of the statistics point to a very important 5 years of a child's life, the child's health, the child's education, everything. And so as we continue to put limited resources to the point that in some countries, we do not even have a national early childhood curriculum. Basically, anybody can open a preschool and anybody can teach a child anything, and we suffer the consequences where 3-year-olds are being forced to write and 3-year-olds are being forced to, regurgitate facts, whereas a lot of international education speaks to play-based learning, building of skills, to ensure that these children build a good foundation. We have issues surrounding our curriculum, access to it. You know, what are we teaching? Is it still applicable? Is it still relevant? Is it aligned with the changing times for our young people, the skill sets? We speak to creativity and curiosity that we're all born with. You know, how is it that as we go into formal education that we stifle that creativity, that everybody must do the same thing and we must all color within those, you know, those preconceived formats and it must all be the same color? How do we then, you know, in some ways destroy that creativity and stifle children's curiosity? We have to speak to, unfortunately, the current issues. Even in the capacity of chief, I was surrounded with children who didn't get the most basic of things. And it is not only in St. Lucia, it's throughout the Caribbean. And luckily for us, we have a situation whereby we have a feeding program in the primary schools. But here was part of our situation. We don't feed our children in the secondary schools. It's not compulsory. So my point always, when I argued for budgetary allocations to be made, was that when they go to secondary school, they're even more hungry. Their bodies are changing. Yeah, they need food. And we feed them when they're young, and when they get older, we say, you know, fend for yourself. With some intervention, this has changed a bit, but we still do not have across the board a feeding program, a program that can look at the basic needs of our children in terms of shelter for them and ensuring that they have that basic, because we can't speak to their needs. We can't speak to higher order thinking skills if your tummy is rumbling. You can't focus, you can't learn. Another big issue for me is that of boys as learners. You know, how do we target within our Caribbean context? It is the fact that many of our boys are learning under a lot of female teachers, female role models, and they're coming from single parent households, basically a lot of which are supported by women. You know, it is not to say that our men aren't doing their part, but we know that's our reality. In some cases, it's better than others, but a lot of our boys as learners and some of the issues that surround them are not being given sufficient input and intervention to really capture them. I am the former vice principal of a secondary school called the George Charles Secondary School. No longer exists, which is really a sad fact. But when I was vice principal there, we had a student population of 600, of which about 450 were boys, because it was a lower ranking secondary school. Intervention was to feed them. That was the major intervention. And this is what kept them at school. Simply feed them through corporate sponsors. And this is where we were able to get bigger successes in terms of the academic performance and the skill development. Our current situation in the Caribbean also speaks to, you know, what our corporate entities will speak to, what's happening with the skills that our children come out of secondary school with. And how does that equate to them being employable? You know, what are the skills that we need in the workplace versus what we teach at secondary schools? Where are the skills that speak to effective time management, that speaks to having difficult conversations, conflict management, you know, appreciation for authority, you know, sticking to task, being consistent in terms of your work ethics? And so our various corporate entities continue to say to us in education, you know, the connection isn't always there. And children leave secondary school, and when they get into the workplace, there's a lot more training that needs to happen. So how can we then bridge that? What can our curriculum do? I must also speak to higher education access. You know, many of our students leave secondary school, and that is a distant reality. And for many of them, something that they will not access. And unfortunately, we must come back to our boys. At the South Louis Community College that St. Lucia has as its main institution of higher learning, as of 2020, almost 75% of the students, they were girls. And again, it speaks to what's happening with our young men. And we can argue that our young men generally go into the world of work, but it is, why is it that they're not accessing higher education to give them better skill sets to be able to hopefully earn more? That is also a question, because some of them will argue that they make more going straight into the world of work than getting their degrees. But it speaks to, what level of employment they will get. Okay, so these are some of our current issues and situations as we move into the next slide. And feel free, if you have any questions, that we can always take them in between. But it's just a couple slides we put together, not too many. I am speaking to our resources and our desired outcomes. I think that, unfortunately, throughout the Caribbean, we have not done enough to tap into our human capital. There's so much that we can offer. But, even yesterday, a friend was reminding me, the prophet is not liked at home. And I want to rebuke that statement. I keep wanting to rebuke that statement. Why is the prophet not liked at home? Why is it that we cannot value our people? We cannot say, these are the skill sets that you bring to the table. Let us applaud you for it. Let us work at improving what we all need, certain aspects of our lives to improve upon. But why can we not clap for our heroes, all the people who have gone before us? Why is it that our human capital can be valued in other places and we cannot do enough to do that? So these are some of the things I've felt that even within my profession, I worked with, as Chief Education Officer, with 2,000 teachers. And I think with 2,000 teachers, my goodness, there's so much if we were to properly tap into it. Some of the things we tried to do. And I'm hoping that other people can continue thereafter, because I was simply building on the foundation. But I do think it's a major area for improvement. Our social capital, we have lots of skills, we do. And, if you look at technology now, the videos coming out, the resources, the things that people are putting together on the spur of the moment, where is our social capital and how best are we using it to help our students? Our morals, our values, what was important to us as a people, as a Caribbean people, as a St. Lucian people, as an international group of people? What are we passing on to our young people in terms of integrity, honesty, earning what you rightfully deserve, respect for authority, all of these things are our values. Our spirituality as well. For me, it's not about, being Christian or focusing on a particular religion, but do we believe that there is a higher being? And, we treat people with respect because we do so. We treat animals with respect because we believe in a spiritual being. And a major desired outcome is the higher order thinking skills. I think that too often we've seen how our own, we bring each other down. We're not critical. We can disagree. We can have, differences of opinion, but it is how we do it, how we support each other, and we can say, hey, I disagree with you, but I want to respect your opinion, and that speaks to a higher order thinking skills. That speaks to evaluating and analyzing situations. It speaks to how we treat people, and all of these are things that I believe we must continue. We must continue to impact. We must continue to encourage. We must continue to enhance. And where the foundation is already there, we must continue to do better at it, to bring about those higher order thinking skills. Because, we keep saying our children are our future. They're not our future. They're not our future. They're right there. They're present. Yeah, they're right there. They are our present now. And if they can't do it when they're children, it's not when they become adults that they will be able to do it. So these higher order thinking skills, we must incorporate right now. And I worked in Austria, in Vienna, and I was really glad. I mean, in some of the situations I came across, as a Caribbean person, I kept smiling to myself, because children were taught to say things like, I really didn't appreciate what you said because it hurt my feelings. And I'm thinking, really? Really? you could have said this differently. And I'm thinking, what? One of our children be like, bash, like, give you one because I don't like what you said. But it spoke to it. I'm not saying it happens everywhere in all schools in Australia, but the school where I was at, there was a deliberate effort to speak to some of those higher order thinking skills and to inculcate in children this appreciation for people, and that words do matter. Yeah. So as we look at the next slide, some of the things I want you to think about, agree, disagree with me. Yeah. So, in as much as we look at issues, for me, it's never about doom and gloom. And Madam Toastmaster, when I look at the mirror, I say to myself, girl, you're blessed. Girl, you're highly favored. Go be appreciative for the day that you have. Be grateful. So I want to always speak to affirmations in my life, in my children's lives, and really try to live a positive life. And I think that self-talk must start with us, saying, hey, yeah, you're beautiful, you're handsome, you're great at this. And if we do not celebrate our own selves and our successes, I don't know who will. And just my own thoughts. So when I look at myself, I really try to see the positives. But I'm saying that the future all doom and gloom. You would have heard now that, St. Lucia is going through its own challenges, own major challenges with crime, with violence, with neglect of our children. And it's also something that I pray about, I think about. I try to do my little bit in my corner, however I can support, I do so. But is that what our Caribbean education system is about? And yesterday, I was part of, virtually that is, part of the march that happened in St. Lucia against violence led by the Catholic Church. And it was just beautiful to see young people in the crowd, young children walking alongside, older ladies on their sticks and walking. And part of the prayers that they had, they featured one of the young people. And that child just read this prayer, and you could just hear the amens and amens going through the crowd, because it just came with such force and vigor and passion that you really felt it. So for me, in as much as all of those things have been part of what I have experienced in my former role, having gone through really horrendous things that happen to children in terms of abuse and neglect and violence, and having buried a couple as well, and having been with the families, I know that we are having major issues, but I still think that with resilience, with a vision that speaks to a clear way forward, with hope that is there, it's not far away, it is there, with foresight, with coming together as a collaborative people, and not only as, Caribbean people, international people in the diaspora as well, putting our hands to the wheel. And sometimes we want to think of big projects, but for me, it's not only about that. For me, it is whatever difference we can make in the life of one child, let's do so, because we're adults now, but we sat in those very same chairs as children. And I always reflect on my own life and think that there would have been teachers that I can name, that I can speak of the experiences I had with them. I can remember what they said to me. And my past classmates tease me because there's one I must mention. Her name was Miss June Sifley. And she taught me at Corinth Secondary School. And she was like, Fiona, shoulders up. Fiona, Corinth going against St. Joseph's Convent in a debating competition. Fiona, you can't do this. Oh, Fiona, we trained for this. Walk tall, walk with confidence, and they'll be scared of you too. You may be scared of them, but they'll be scared of you. So when we speak to the difference we can make, it is to say that we can make it in our own families. We can make it with our neighborhood. We can make it with the children that we work with, their parents, in our church community. Because in as much as we're looking for major changes, we have to start. And if everybody does that, we do have the domino effect. So for me, it is not all doom and gloom. There are major things that we need to focus on. At this juncture, I just want to give you a little bit of statistics that I want you to reflect upon when I say, you know, in our neck of the woods, what can we do differently? I want to tell you that, and you can find it online as well, one of the major factors we have in the Caribbean is that we know we do our CXCs. So, and across the region, meaning all of the CXC, thank you for the green, I love that, so I'm well in time. Across the region, we do our CXC examinations. And we would note that only 40% of the eligible candidates within the entire Caribbean register for the CSEC in the first place. That's 40%. Of those registered, only 22% get acceptable grades in 5 or more subjects. 22, 5 or more subjects. 12% of those get 3 to 4 subjects. And note that 66% get 2 or less subjects. 2 or less subjects at the CSEC level. And we're speaking about maybe 150,000 students across the region, including places like Guyana and Trinidad that have large cohorts. So when I speak to vision for the Caribbean, when I speak to hope, when I speak to foresight, it is to say that every one of those children that we can impact, and I have a soft spot for the boys. That's just my reality, because I think that so many of them just need so much more that we are giving them. So something to think about. The statistics are not meant to bring us down, but it is to say, what difference can we make? So I'd like to say thank you very much for having listened to me. I don't know if we have the question and answer thereafter, but I'll hand over to the chairperson of this afternoon's or this evening session. Thank you.
This is a heated topic, and just to check with our timer, that